He was a man marked by grief and dangerous choices, used to controlling everything and everyone. She was a quiet young woman who hid her body and soul, as if protecting something sacred. But when their paths crossed, desire was stronger than any plan. If you love stories of love and romance, watch until the end. You won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. Let's continue. Clara wasn't made of glass but of silence. Not that peaceful, almost spiritual silence, but the kind of silence forged in the friction between survival and memory. From a young age, she had learned to exist on the margins of rooms, of voices, of others' attention. Raised in a secluded abbey in the Cotswold Hills, among nuns who confused discipline with penance, she had soon discovered that her body could be her prison or her weapon. She had chosen silence as a shield. A virgin not out of naivety but by decision. A vow not of purity but of autonomy. Clara cleaned the corridors like one traversing abysses, with downcast eyes, acute senses and a locked heart. At 23, she found herself inside Maxwell Manor, the property of an ancient and powerful family in the Wiltshire countryside, enveloped in rumours and secrets. The East Wing was forbidden. Almost no one entered it. It was there that Clara liked to hide, not out of curiosity, but because the silence was deeper, almost welcoming, until the day Victor Maxwell crossed her path. The Cotswold Hills surrounding the manor seemed to guard secrets as ancient as the family that owned those lands. The cypress trees lining the entrance drive stood like silent sentinels, witnesses to untold stories. The wind blowing through the vineyards carried whispers of a past no one dared to openly name. It was in this context that Clara had found refuge, or perhaps a new prison. "Miss, the East Wing is off limits to staff," the stern voice of the housekeeper. Mrs. Sterling resonated behind her one afternoon. "Mr. Maxwell is very clear on this point." "I apologize," Clara murmured, lowering her gaze as she had been taught at the Abbey. "I was just trying to clean better." Mrs. Sterling, a woman in her 60s with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to see through lies, scrutinized her with suspicion. "There are 20 other rooms that require your attention. The East Wing has been closed since Mrs. Maxwell, since the incident happened. The incident. That's what it was called in the manor. No one ever uttered the word tragedy or explained exactly what had happened. Only whispers among the staff, conversations interrupted when someone entered a room, glances laden with innuendo. Clara had gathered fragments, the master's young wife, a car, a cliff, and then silence. That day, returning to her duties in the other wings of the manor, Clara felt Victor Maxwell's presence for the first time, even before seeing him. It was as if the air became heavier, denser. She looked up from the marble floor she was polishing and saw him at the end of the corridor, motionless, observing her. He was tall, with broad shoulders, clad in an impeccable grey suit. His black hair showed a few silver strands at the temples, though he didn't seem to be over 40. But it was his eyes that captured Clara's attention, eyes of such a clear grey that they seemed almost transparent, cold as steel, yet burning as if hiding an inner flame. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Clara felt her heart quicken, but she didn't lower her gaze as she normally would have. Something in that man challenged her to remain still, to hold his gaze. He was the first to move, advancing with measured steps towards her. He didn't walk. He invaded the space, as if every inch of the manor belonged to him, including her. "You're the new one," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Clara Reed," she replied, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. He studied her as one would study an interesting object in a museum. "How long have you worked here?" 2 weeks, sir." "And do you like the manor?" The question surprised her. Masters rarely inquired about the well-being or opinions of the staff. It's a very peculiar place," she replied cautiously. A hint of a smile creased Victor's lips, so fleeting that Clara thought she had imagined it. "Peculiar," he repeated. "A diplomatic way of saying unsettling, I imagine." Clara didn't respond, but something in her silence seemed to intrigue the man even more. "Have you worked elsewhere before coming here?" he asked without moving, maintaining that distance that was both too close and too far. "No, sir. I came from St. Catherine's Abbey." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "An abbey? Interesting. You're not a novice, are you?" "No, sir. I was an orphan. The nuns raised me." "I see," he said. but there was something in his tone that suggested he understood much more than she had said. "Well, Miss Reed, I hope you'll find your place here at Maxwell Manor." He turned to leave, but then stopped. Without turning completely, he added, "And I hope you'll respect the rules of the house, including the prohibition of access to the East Wing." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. "How do you know?" "I know everything that happens in my house," he interrupted her, now looking at her again. Everything. That night, in her small attic room in the manor, Clara couldn't sleep. Victor Maxwell's words echoed in her mind. His presence had disturbed her in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. Though she knew she probably should have been afraid, it was something else, something deeper and more unsettling. She got out of bed and approached the small window overlooking the manor's back garden. The moon illuminated the hedge maze, the central fountain with its marble statue, and beyond the east wing with its windows always closed, like eyes refusing to see. As she watched, she noticed a light in one of those windows, faint, flickering like a candle, and then a shadow moving behind the curtains. Victor Maxwell was there in the forbidden wing in the middle of the night. What was he doing? What was he guarding in those rooms that no one could see? Clara hugged herself, suddenly aware of the cold. But it wasn't just the cold of the night that made her tremble. It was the feeling that, in some incomprehensible way, her destiny was linked to Victor Maxwell's and to the secrets of the East Wing, as if she had been called to that manor for a purpose she didn't yet understand. Before returning to bed, she took a small notebook from her apron pocket. It was her secret refuge, the place where she entrusted thoughts she couldn't share with anyone. She opened a new page and wrote, "Today I met the man who owns this house. He has the eyes of someone who has seen too much or perhaps done too much. He looks at me as if he knows me, as if he sees something in me that I myself don't see. And I strangely am not afraid of him. Should I be?" She closed the notebook and hid it under her mattress. Outside, clouds covered the moon, enveloping the manor in darkness. In the silence of the night, Clara felt that something was about to change in her life, something as inevitable as the rising tide. The following days passed in a strange tension. Clara continued her duties, but constantly felt Victor's gaze on her. Sometimes she would catch him suddenly in a room, standing by a window, watching her as she cleaned. Other times she noticed the slight movement of a security camera following her movements. Yet despite this scrutiny, she didn't feel threatened. It was as if he was searching for something in her, something he himself couldn't define. One late September morning, Clara was cleaning the large main drawing room. The tall windows let in the golden light of the Cotswold dawn, illuminating the family portraits adorning the walls. Stern portraits of Maxwell men and women, generations who had lived within those walls, building a wine empire known throughout England. She paused before the most recent portrait. Victor, standing next to a brown-haired woman with bright green eyes. It must be her, the missing wife. Her name was Blanche, a voice behind her said, making her jump. Victor had entered the room silently. "Blanche Maxwell, born Stone. I'm sorry, sir." "I didn't mean to," Clara began, feeling guilty for being caught looking at the portrait. "It doesn't matter," he interrupted her, approaching the painting. "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" Clara looked more closely at the portrait. Blanche Maxwell had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something reserved in that expression, a secret perhaps, or a sadness. "Yes, she was," she replied sincerely. "When was this portrait painted?" 2 years ago, a few months before the incident," Victor said, his voice suddenly harder. Then, looking intently at Clara, "Sometimes I wonder if she already knew what was going to happen." Clara felt a shiver. "What do you mean?" Victor seemed to shake himself out of a deep thought. "Nothing. Forget it." He turned to leave, but then stopped. "There will be a small dinner tonight. Some business associates. Mrs. Sterling needs help with the service." "Of course, sir. Will the black dress suit you? The one the maids wear for formal occasions?" The question surprised her. "I think so," she replied cautiously. "Good, black suits you." And with these enigmatic words, he left the room. That evening, wearing the black uniform with a starched white apron, Clara helped serve wine and courses in the main dining room. The table was set with the finest china, and the silver gleamed in the candlelight. The guests were 3 businessmen with their wives, all elegant, sophisticated, with that confidence that only money and power can give. Victor sat at the head of the table, perfectly at ease in his role as host. He spoke of harvests, new markets, and overseas expansion. But Clara noticed that from time to time, his gaze sought hers across the room. Each time their eyes met, she felt a strange sensation in the pit of her stomach, a mixture of fear and something else she didn't want to name. As she served dessert, a man in his 60s with silver hair and dark eyes addressed Victor. "My dear, the manor is as splendid as I remember it. A true jewel from another era." "Thank you, Anthony," Victor replied, raising his glass. "I try to keep it as it was in my father's time." "And the East Wing?" the man asked, lowering his voice slightly. "Have you ever—" "No," Victor interrupted him abruptly. "It remains closed." An embarrassed silence fell over the table. Then one of the women, trying to lighten the atmosphere, said, "I hear you're thinking of launching a new wine. A red, isn't it?" The conversation resumed, but Clara had noticed the change in Victor's expression. His face had hardened, his eyes had grown colder. Whatever had happened in the East Wing, it was a topic that caused pain. Later, as the guests had moved to the drawing room for liqueurs, Clara was tidying the dining room when she accidentally dropped a glass, which shattered on the marble floor. She immediately knelt to pick up the fragments, cursing herself for her carelessness. "Leave it," a voice above her said. Victor had returned to the room alone. "Someone else will do it." "No, it was my fault," Clara insisted, continuing to gather the larger pieces of glass. Victor approached and, unexpectedly, knelt beside her. He gently took her hand, stopping her. The touch of his fingers on hers was electric, unexpected. "You'll cut yourself," he said, his voice lower, almost intimate. Clara looked up and met his eyes, so close now. There was something in that gaze, an intensity that made her hold her breath. For a moment it was as if time had stopped. Then, slowly, Victor raised a hand and, with a gesture that seemed almost involuntary, brushed her nape with his fingers, just beneath her gathered hair. The touch went through her like an electric shock. It wasn't just physical contact. It was something deeper, as if that simple gesture had activated a hidden memory, a memory she didn't know she had. She recoiled instinctively, confused by her own reaction. Victor observed her with an enigmatic expression. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "What?" Clara asked, her voice barely audible. "Your reaction," he replied, standing up and helping her to her feet. "It's as if—" "No, never mind." He took a few steps back, regaining control. "My guests are waiting." "Can you finish here?" "Of course, sir," she replied, still shaken by that moment of unexpected intimacy. When Victor left the room, Clara remained still, trying to understand what had just happened. The touch on her nape continued to echo on her skin. Had it been a calculated gesture or an irrepressible impulse? And why had she reacted that way, as if her body recognized that touch from a distant time? Later that night, as all the guests had left and the manor was immersed in silence, Clara couldn't sleep. She felt restless, agitated by thoughts she couldn't quiet. She decided to go down to the kitchen for a glass of water. Wrapping herself in a shawl over her nightgown. The manor at night was a different place. Shadows seemed deeper, corridors longer, sounds amplified in the silence. As she walked through the main corridor, she noticed a light coming from Victor's study. The door was ajar, and driven by a curiosity she knew was dangerous, she approached silently. Victor was sitting at his desk, illuminated only by the table lamp. In front of him was a framed photograph and a glass of whiskey. He looked tired, vulnerable in a way he had never shown during the day. He was talking, Clara realized. Talking to the photograph. "Why do you still haunt me?" she heard him say, his voice hoarse from alcohol or emotion. "I thought that with you, everything would end.
But then she arrived and now—"
Now I don't know what to think anymore." Clara held her breath, sensing he was talking about her. What did it mean? How did her presence disturb Victor Maxwell? What was the connection to the past that seemed to obsess him? She took a step back, trying to move away unnoticed, but the old wooden floor creaked under her weight. Victor's head snapped up. "Who's there?" he asked abruptly. Clara stood motionless, torn between flight and admission. Before she could decide, Victor appeared at the study door, his features hard in the shadow. "You," he said, recognizing her. He didn't seem angry, but rather resigned. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," she replied, finding a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Who are you talking about, Mr. Maxwell? Who is haunting you?" Victor looked at her for a long time as if he was evaluating something. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "Perhaps it's time we talked, you and I." Clara hesitated at the threshold of the study, aware that crossing that door meant entering dangerous territory, a labyrinth of secrets from which she might not emerge unscathed. But curiosity and something else, an inexplicable attraction to that tormented man, pushed her forward. Victor's study was a masculine sanctum sanctorum, dark wood-paneled walls, shelves filled with leather-bound books, the scent of tobacco and leather permeating the air. A large family portrait dominated the wall behind the desk, young Victor with his parents and an elder brother, all with the same intense gaze, the same proud posture. "Sit down," Victor said, indicating an armchair opposite the desk. He remained standing, pouring himself another whiskey. "Would you like one?" "No, thank you," Clara replied, feeling out of place in that masculine sanctuary in her simple nightgown and shawl. Victor studied her for a long moment. "Do you know why I hired you, Clara?" The question took her by surprise. "Because you needed staff." A bitter smile creased the man's lips. "The manor already has enough staff. So I hired you for a very specific reason." He approached the desk and picked up a folder. He opened it and handed her a photograph. "Do you recognize her?" Clara looked at the image. It showed a young woman, perhaps in her 20s, sitting on a park bench. Beside her was a small child, perhaps 4 or 5 years old. The woman had long brown hair and a bright smile. The child looked at her adoringly. "No," she replied honestly. "Who are they?" "The woman is your mother, Eleanor Reed. The child is you." Clara felt her blood run cold. "Impossible," she whispered. "I never knew my mother. I grew up in the Abbey since I was a few months old." "That's the story they told you," Victor said, taking another photograph from the folder. "Look at this one." The image showed the same woman, Eleanor, with a man. They were laughing, embraced in front of what looked like a small London cafe. The man was attractive, in his 30s, with dark hair and lively eyes. "Who is he?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Francis Stone," Victor replied, carefully observing her reaction. "My wife Blanche's brother, and the man your mother had a relationship with for almost 10 years. Clara felt her head spin. Nothing she was hearing made sense. "But the nuns told me my mother died in childbirth, that I was abandoned." "Lies," Victor interrupted her. "Your mother died when you were 5. A car accident. You were sent to the Abbey because there was no one else who could take care of you. Francis was complicated. He couldn't raise a child." "How do you know all these things?" Clara asked, trying to absorb these revelations. Victor sat on the edge of the desk, looking at her intently. "Because I've spent the last 2 years investigating everything concerning Francis Stone, the man who destroyed my marriage." The missing piece of the puzzle fell into place. "Francis and your wife—" "Yes," Victor confirmed, his voice harsh. "Francis and Blanche had an affair for years. An affair she tried to hide from me, but which I discovered shortly before her incident." Clara clutched the shawl around her shoulders, suddenly cold despite the mild temperature of the room. "And me? What do I have to do with all this?" Victor took a sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "At first I just wanted to know everything about Francis, to understand what kind of man had seduced my wife. During my research, I discovered his relationship with your mother, and then I found you." "You deliberately sought me out," Clara realized, a sense of betrayal growing within her. "You offered me this job not because of my abilities, but because I am the niece of the man who destroyed my life," Victor completed. Yes, the revelation hit her like a slap. Everything had been a lie, a manipulation. Her presence in the manor was not accidental, but part of a plan she didn't yet fully comprehend. "Why?" she asked, standing up. "What do you want from me, revenge? Against a woman who didn't even know the man who ruined your marriage?" Victor put down his glass and approached her. He was so close that she could smell his aftershave, mixed with the scent of whiskey. "At first, perhaps, I wanted to see you, to study Francis's blood, to look for signs of his seduction in you, of his ability to deceive. And what did you find?" Clara asked, surprisingly steady despite her inner turmoil. "Something completely unexpected," he replied, his voice suddenly lower. "I found something that reminded me of her, Blanche." Clara took a step back, confused. "I don't understand." "Neither do I," Victor admitted. You have nothing in common with Blanche physically, yet there's something in your gestures, in the way you tilt your head when you listen, in the way you touch old objects, as if you can feel their history. It's unsettling. Unsettling for you, perhaps, Clara said, finding her inner strength. For me, it's terrifying to discover that I've been manipulated, watched, studied like an insect under a microscope. She turned to leave, but Victor gently grasped her wrist. His touch was not aggressive, but pleading. Wait, there's more. Clara stopped, looking at his hand on her wrist. Please let me go. Victor obeyed immediately, but his eyes continued to hold her. The East Wing, have you never wondered why it's closed? I imagine it's where you lived with your wife, Clara replied. Yes, but there's more. Victor ran a hand through his hair, an unexpectedly vulnerable gesture. After the incident, I couldn't bring myself to enter those rooms for months. When I finally did, I found something strange. What? Oh, it's a letter, hidden in the false bottom of a drawer in her desk. It was addressed to you. Clara's heart skipped a beat. To me, but that's impossible. Your wife didn't know me. She couldn't have written a letter for me. Yet she did, Victor insisted. Your name was written on the envelope. Clara Reed. It must be a coincidence. Another Clara Reed. That's what I thought too at first. But then I investigated and discovered that your mother and Blanche knew each other. They had met a few times through Francis. Clara felt the ground give way beneath her. Each new revelation seemed more absurd than the last, yet somehow everything began to connect, like the pieces of a macabre puzzle. Where is this letter? She finally asked. In the East Wing, in her room. Victor hesitated, then added, I'll take you there tomorrow. It's time you read it. Clara looked at him, trying to understand if she could trust him. This man had manipulated her, used her for some dark plan of revenge or obsession. Yet now he seemed sincere in his confusion, in his search for answers. Why should I trust you? She asked. You shouldn't, he replied with surprising honesty, but I believe we both want to understand what's happening. What connects you, me, Francis, and Blanche? Because when I look at you, sometimes I see her, and because I suspect when you touch certain things in the manor, you feel something you shouldn't feel. Clara didn't answer, but Victor had hit the mark. Since her arrival, she had experienced strange moments of déjà vu, inexplicable feelings of familiarity with places she had never been before. Tomorrow, then, she finally said. But not for you, for myself. To discover the truth about my family. Victor nodded slowly. For the truth, then. Good night, Clara. Good night, Mr. Maxwell. Returning to her room, Clara felt the weight of the evening's revelations. Her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions, of incomprehensible connections. Her life, which she had believed simple yet solitary, had suddenly become a tangle of secrets, betrayals, and invisible ties to people she had never known. She sat on the bed and took out her notebook. This time, instead of writing, she flipped through the previous pages. There were dreams she had noted in recent weeks, vivid images of a terrace overlooking vineyards, of a woman playing the piano, of a necklace with a spiral pendant. Dreams she had attributed to her imagination, but which now seemed to hold a deeper meaning. In one of the most recent dreams, she had seen herself, or someone very similar to her, looking at her reflection in an antique mirror. But the reflection showed a different face, with green eyes instead of her own brown eyes, eyes like Blanche Maxwell's in the portrait. She closed the notebook, suddenly frightened by the implications. What was happening? Was it possible that there was a spiritual connection between her and Victor's deceased wife? Or was there a more rational, more earthly explanation for these phenomena? She thought back to the moment Victor had touched her nape. That gesture had awakened in her a sensation so intense, so familiar, as if her body remembered a touch her mind had never known. As if, in some impossible way, she had already lived that moment. Outside the window, the moon illuminated the vineyards and, in the distance, the outline of the Cotswold Hills. Somewhere in the night, an owl hooted, a sound that seemed like a warning. Tomorrow she would cross the threshold of the East Wing. Tomorrow, perhaps, she would begin to understand why fate had brought her to Maxwell Manor, and what role she was to play in this story of passion, betrayal, and buried secrets. The following morning, Clara woke with a strange sense of calm, as if, after the storm of revelations the previous night, she had entered the eye of the hurricane. a moment of quiet before everything began to swirl around her again. She dressed carefully, choosing not her usual maid's uniform, but a simple dark blue dress she had brought with her from the Abbey. Today she would not be an employee following orders, but a woman searching for her own past. When she went down for breakfast, Mrs. Sterling looked at her with disapproval. "Where do you think you're going dressed like that?" she asked, hands on her hips. "You have duties here, girl." "Not today," Clara simply replied. "Mr. Maxwell's orders." The woman stared at her suspiciously, but dared not challenge the master's name. "We'll see," she muttered, moving away with an expression that promised further investigations. Clara ate breakfast alone in the kitchen, aware of the curious glances of the other maids. The news that the master had somehow excused her from her duties had already spread, inevitably generating gossip and speculation. At 10 o'clock sharp, as agreed the night before, Victor was waiting for her in the main corridor. He wore an informal suit, dark trousers and a white shirt without a tie, but still exuded a natural authority that made anyone who crossed his path lower their gaze. Everyone except Clara, who looked him straight in the eye when she reached him. "Are you ready?" he asked, studying her attire with approval. "Yes," she simply replied. Victor took a bunch of old keys from his pocket and headed towards the heavy oak door that separated the main wing of the manor from the east wing. Clara followed him, ignoring the astonished glances of passing staff. When they reached the door, Victor hesitated, his hand on the lock. "I don't come in here often," he admitted, a shadow crossing his face. "Only when the memories become too difficult to ignore." He inserted the key and turned it. The mechanism clicked with a metallic sound that echoed in the silent corridor. The door opened slowly, revealing another corridor, but this one was different. The curtains were drawn, plunging the space into a twilight, interrupted only by thin rays of light filtering through the cracks. The air was still, with a faint smell of disuse and something Clara couldn't immediately identify. Perfume, she realized. A feminine scent, persistent despite the time that had passed. Blanche loved lilies, Victor said, noticing her reaction. She had fresh bouquets brought into all the rooms every week. "Sometimes I still think I can smell them." Clara followed him down the corridor. The walls were decorated with framed photographs, Victor and Blanche in various locations, Venice, Paris, New York. In all of them, they looked like the perfect couple. But looking more closely, Clara noticed something in Blanche's eyes, a distance perhaps, or a hidden sadness behind the smile. "Were you happy?" she asked impulsively. Victor stopped in front of a photograph showing them on a yacht, the blue sea behind them. "We were at first, then something changed. Or perhaps it was always there, and I didn't want to see it." They continued until they reached a double door at the end of the corridor. Victor opened it, revealing a large bedroom. It was a beautiful room, furnished with impeccable taste. Antique light wood furniture, a large four-poster bed, tall windows overlooking the rear gardens. But it was also a room frozen in time, as if someone had simply stopped a clock. There were still personal items scattered about, a book open on the bedside table, a silk dressing gown hanging on a screen, perfume bottles on the dressing table. "You haven't changed anything," Clara observed. "I couldn't," Victor replied, remaining on the threshold as if he dared not fully enter. "It's as if—" "I was waiting for her to come back." Clara advanced into the room, drawn by a force she didn't fully comprehend. She felt strange, not like an intruder, but like someone returning to a familiar place after a long absence. Her eyes were drawn to a small writing desk near the window. Without thinking, she walked towards it. "It's there," Victor said behind her. "The central drawer has a false bottom. It opens by pressing the right corner." Clara sat on the chair in front of the desk, suddenly feeling as if she was playing a role in a play whose script she didn't know. Her hands moved almost on their own, opening the drawer, finding the hidden mechanism. With a slight click, the bottom of the drawer lifted, revealing a secret space. Inside was a cream-colored paper envelope, sealed with red sealing wax, and on the envelope, written in elegant handwriting, "For Clara Reed." Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. The paper was of good quality, heavy to the touch. The sealing wax stamp showed a symbol she didn't recognize, a spiral with a small star in the center. "Blanche's ring," Victor explained, noticing her gaze on the seal. "A family heirloom." She always used it to seal important letters. Clara delicately broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside were several folded sheets, written in the same elegant handwriting. She began to read, aware that Victor was observing her every reaction. "Dear Clara, if you are reading this letter, it means my plan has worked, and you have arrived at Maxwell Manor. It also means that I am no longer here. I don't know how much time will have passed, and months, years perhaps, but I knew that sooner or later you would arrive. We have never met, yet I know you. I have seen your face in my dreams, as clear as if you were before me. I have seen your eyes so similar to your mother Eleanor's. Yes, I knew your mother, and through her I knew you. Eleanor and I first met 5 years ago through my brother Francis. At first I hated her, the woman who had the heart of the man I loved, but over time we developed a strange bond, both trapped in the orbit of the Stone Maxwell men, both seeking a way out. Eleanor told me about you. She showed me your photographs. She told me about the abbey where they sent you after her passing. I felt a connection with you that I cannot rationally explain. As if we are bound by an invisible thread through time. There are things you need to know, truths that might seem impossible, but which you will have to accept. The first is that the Maxwell family has a dark history. Generations of secrets and obsessions, of forbidden loves and betrayals. A story that repeats itself like a curse. The second is that Victor is not the man everyone believes him to be. He is not a monster, but a man broken by events that overwhelmed him. A man capable of great love and great cruelty. The third, and most difficult to accept, is that you and I share something that goes beyond simple acquaintance. A spiritual connection, a soul bond. When I have left this world, part of me will continue to exist through you. I feel it, I know it with a certainty that defies logic. I don't ask you to believe me now, but I ask you to listen to the signs, to trust the sensations you will feel in this house. I ask you to seek the truth, not only about your family, but also about my story with Victor. In the bedside drawer, you will find my diary. Read it. It contains the truth no one knows, not even Victor. Especially not him. And finally, I ask you to do what I did not have the courage to do. Break the cycle. Free Victor and yourself from the past that chains us all. With affection and hope. Blanche Maxwell. Clara let the letter fall onto the desk, feeling overwhelmed. Blanche's words resonated in her mind, incredible yet strangely convincing. She turned to look at Victor, who had remained silent throughout her reading. "Did you read it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I couldn't. Whatever Blanche wanted to tell you, it was between the two of you." Clara stood up and walked towards the bedside table mentioned in the letter. She opened the drawer and found a small blue leather-bound book, fastened with a golden padlock. The key was beside it, a tiny gold object with a star-shaped charm. "This is her diary," she said, showing it to Victor. He visibly paled. "I didn't know she kept a diary." "Blanche says it contains the truth no one knows," Clara said, returning towards him with the book in hand. "Not even you." Victor hesitated, then gestured towards the diary. "You should read it, alone." "Why are you allowing all this?" Clara asked, confused by his behavior. "Yesterday you told me you brought me here for revenge, to study the niece of the man who ruined your marriage. Now you're allowing me to read your wife's most intimate secrets." Victor looked at her intensely, his grey eyes seeming to pierce through her. "Because from the moment I saw you, I felt there was something bigger at play, something that goes beyond my anger, my pain. And because," he paused as if the next words were difficult to utter, "because when I look at you, sometimes I see her. Not physically, but there's something in your gestures, in the way you tilt your head when you're thoughtful, in your silences." Clara clutched the diary to her chest, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "Do you really believe there's a connection between me and Blanche?" "I don't know what to believe," Victor admitted. "I only know that nothing has been the same since you arrived. It's as if the manor itself has awakened, as if it was waiting for you." A tension-filled silence fell between them. Clara felt the weight of the diary in her hands, the weight of secrets, of hidden truths, of invisible connections that seemed to bind her to people she had never known. "I will read the diary," she finally said, "but not here, in my room." Victor nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need. And Clara," he stopped her as she headed for the door, "whatever you discover, remember that the past is past. We decide what to do with it." Clara looked at him one last time before leaving the room, carrying the diary and the letter. As she walked through the East Wing corridor, she felt as if Blanche's eyes followed her from the photographs on the walls. It wasn't an unsettling feeling, but almost protective, as if an invisible presence guided her, showing her the way through a labyrinth she didn't know she had to cross. In the solitude of her room, Clara stared at Blanche's diary for a long time without opening it. The small blue leather-bound book seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it contained not just words but the very essence of the woman who had written it. The golden key shone in the afternoon light, filtering through the window, inviting her to discover the secrets it held. Finally, with a deep breath, Clara inserted the key into the small padlock. It opened with a delicate, almost musical click. The pages were of fine paper, slightly yellowed with time, covered in the same elegant handwriting as the letter. Some pages contained small sketches, flowers, landscapes, sometimes barely hinted faces. Blanche must have had artistic talent, Clara thought. She began to read from the beginning. The diary covered the last 2 years of Blanche's life, starting shortly after her 5th wedding anniversary with Victor. The first pages were relatively light, descriptions of daily life at Maxwell Manor, reflections on marriage, thoughts on future plans. But even in these initial pages, Clara could sense a subtle unease like a shadow lengthening at sunset. "Today we argued again for the usual reason," Blanche wrote in one passage. "Victor wants a child. He wants one with an intensity that sometimes frightens me. He doesn't understand or doesn't want to understand that it's not that simple. Not for me. Not after what happened." Clara frowned. What was she referring to? She continued reading, and gradually the picture became clearer. Blanche had suffered a miscarriage during her 2nd year of marriage, a traumatic event that had deeply affected her. Since then, she had been unable to conceive, and this impossibility had become an ever-open wound in their marriage. As the pages progressed, the tone of the diary changed. The unease became more pronounced. Blanche wrote of her growing sense of isolation at Maxwell Manor, of Victor's obsession with the family legacy, of his control becoming increasingly suffocating. And then, about halfway through the diary, a new name appeared, Francis. "I saw Francis again today after a long time," Blanche wrote. "He was different from how I remembered him, more mature, more self-assured. He told me about his life in London, his career as an architect, his freedom. As I listened, I felt something awaken within me, a desire for life that I thought I had buried long ago." The following pages documented the development of a clandestine relationship. At first, they were just innocent meetings, lunches, walks, conversations. But gradually, inevitably, they transformed into something deeper. Blanche described the guilt she felt, but also the overwhelming joy of those stolen moments with Francis. "With him, I am alive again," she wrote. "With Victor, I am a precious object, preserved under a glass case. With Francis, I am a woman who breathes, who feels, who lives." Clara paused, disturbed by the direction the story was taking. She couldn't help but think of Victor, the man she had come to know in recent days. She saw in him pain and anger, but also vulnerability and loneliness. For the first time, she began to wonder if his desire for revenge was not in fact a desperate attempt to make sense of an incomprehensible loss. She continued reading. Blanche recounted how Francis had told her about Eleanor, Clara's mother, how they had met and surprisingly become friends, 2 women united by love for the same man, but also by a mutual understanding that transcended jealousy. "Eleanor is extraordinary," Blanche wrote. "She has a strength I admire, a courage I wish I had. She doesn't judge, she doesn't demand. She knows that Francis will never completely leave either me or her. And somehow she has made peace with this." She showed me pictures of her little girl, Clara, a beautiful creature, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible. Looking at her, I felt a strange connection, as if she were somehow linked to my destiny too. Pages followed where Blanche spoke of strange recurring dreams. Dreams in which she saw a young woman walking through the corridors of Maxwell Manor, touching her objects, sleeping in her bed. A woman with Clara's face. I know it sounds like madness, but these dreams have a quality of reality that I cannot ignore. It's as if I see the future, or perhaps a possibility of the future, as if my soul is trying to tell me something important. And then a shocking revelation. Today I discovered I am pregnant. Not by Victor, but by Francis. The child I have longed for arrives now, at the most impossible moment. What should I do? If I tell Victor, I know what will happen. His rage knows no bounds when he feels betrayed, and I cannot endanger this new life. Clara put a hand to her mouth. Blanche was pregnant when she disappeared. This changed everything. She continued to read feverishly, trying to understand what had happened. The last pages of the diary were the most unsettling. Blanche wrote of her plan to leave Victor, to flee with Francis and start a new life. But she feared her husband's reaction. She knew all too well what he was capable of when he lost control. "I'm afraid, but I am also determined," she wrote on the last dated page. "Tomorrow I will meet Victor at our special place, the cliff overlooking the sea. I will tell him the truth, all of it. I know he will be furious, devastated, but I must do it. For myself, for my child, for the future I want to build." And then, a final note hastily written in less careful handwriting. He found out everything. I don't know how, but he knows about Francis, about us. He came to my study. He was beside himself. I had never seen him like that. I'm afraid of what he might do. I've hidden this diary. If anything happens to me, I want the truth to be known. And I wrote a letter for Clara. I know that one day she will come here. I see it in my dreams. She will be my witness, my continuation. Through her, perhaps, I can still find the freedom that was denied to me in this life. Clara closed the diary, her hands trembling. Blanche's words echoed in her mind, creating connections she hadn't seen before. The incident that led to Blanche's disappearance had not been an accident. And Victor knew. He must have known. She stood up, pacing nervously around the room. The revelations of the diary clashed with the image of the man she had known. Victor, with his pain and obsession, with his torment and his loneliness, was he truly capable of harming Blanche? And then there were the other implications. The connection Blanche felt with her, the prophetic dreams, the feeling of déjà vu that Clara herself had experienced since her arrival at Maxwell Manor. Was it possible that there really was a spiritual link between them? That something of Blanche's soul lived through her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly hid the diary under the pillow before opening it. It was Mrs. Sterling. "Mr. Maxwell requests your presence for dinner," the housekeeper said with a tone that suggested how unusual she found this request. "In the small dining room at 8. "Thank you," Clara replied, trying to maintain a neutral tone. "I'll be there." When the housekeeper had left, Clara sat back on the bed. Dinner with Victor! After what she had just discovered, the idea filled her with apprehension. What should she do? Confront him with the truth? Or pretend not to know? Continue to investigate, try to understand the whole picture better before taking a stand? The truth was that despite everything, she felt an undeniable attraction to Victor. An attraction that now seemed even more complicated. Was it truly hers? Or was it somehow an echo of Blanche's feelings? And if so, what feelings were they? The initial love or the final fear? She got up and went to the window. The sun was setting over the vineyards, painting the landscape in gold and red. Somewhere in the manor, Victor was probably thinking about her, waiting to see if she had discovered the truth. She knew that evening would be a turning point. Whatever choice she made, there would be no going back. She took the diary from under the pillow and hid it in the false bottom of her drawer, the same trick Blanche had used. Then she began to prepare for dinner, aware that she was about to enter dangerous territory, where truth and illusion, past and present, intertwined like the threads of an incomprehensible tapestry. As she brushed her hair in front of the mirror, for an instant, a very brief, unsettling instant, she seemed to see another face reflected. A face with green eyes and a sad smile. The face of Blanche Maxwell. She spun around, but of course there was no one in the room. Only her, with her doubts, her fears, and a growing determination to uncover the whole truth, whatever the cost. "I will be your witness," she whispered, as if Blanche could hear her. "I promise you." At 8:05, Clara descended the stairs leading to the main floor of the manor. She had carefully chosen her attire. A simple but elegant dress, a deep blue that she had found in the wardrobe of her room. She didn't know who had put it there. She certainly hadn't brought it with her from the Abbey. But it fit her perfectly, as if it had been tailor-made for her. The manor corridors seemed different that evening, more alive, more attentive. Shadows danced on the walls as Clara passed, and she almost seemed to hear whispers behind her. It wasn't fear she felt, but a strange, electrifying awareness, as if every object, every corner of the house held a memory that slowly awakened at her passage. The small dining room was an intimate space, with a round, dark wood table surrounded by 6 upholstered chairs. A crystal chandelier cast a warm light, and the open windows let in the evening breeze carrying the scent of the vineyards. Victor was already there, standing by the window, a glass of wine in his hand. He turned when he heard her enter. "Clara," he said, and the way he pronounced her name contained a world of unspoken emotions. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, remaining on the threshold. "This dress, I found it in my room." Victor nodded slowly. "It was Blanche's. I asked Mrs. Sterling to put some of her clothes in your wardrobe. I hope you don't mind. Why did you do that?" "I don't know," he admitted, putting down his glass. "An impulse, I suppose. I wanted to see if they would fit me," she completed. "If I would look even more like her." A tense silence fell between them. Victor motioned for her to sit at the table, already set with fine china and crystals gleaming in the candlelight. A waiter appeared discreetly, serving an appetizer of beef carpaccio with parmesan shavings and rocket. When they were alone again, Victor poured wine into both glasses. "It's a vintage Pinot Noir," he said, "from our finest estate vineyard in the Surrey Hills. The 2015 vintage, exceptional." Clara took a small sip. The wine was rich, complex, with notes of ripe red fruits and spices. A powerful wine telling the story of the land from which it came. "Did you read it?" Victor asked suddenly. There was no need to specify what he was referring to. Clara looked him in the eyes. "Yes, and what did you discover?" "The truth," she simply replied. "Or at least the truth according to Blanche." Victor studied her carefully. "And do you believe me to be a murderer now? Do you believe I killed her?" The question was direct, brutal in its simplicity. Clara put down her fork, thinking carefully before answering. "I believe there was a confrontation between you. I believe you knew about her relationship with Francis. And I believe you knew about the child." Victor visibly paled. "Child? What child?" His shock seemed genuine. Clara scrutinized him carefully. "In her diary, Blanche writes about being pregnant. By Francis. It was the last secret she wanted to confess to you on the day of the incident." Victor stood up abruptly, knocking over his glass. The red wine spilled onto the white tablecloth like a stain of blood. "It's not possible," he whispered. "I didn't know." "I swear to you, Clara, I didn't know about the child. But you knew about Francis." "Yes," he admitted, slowly sitting back down. "I had discovered it a few days before. I found messages on her phone. I was devastated, furious, but not what?" Clara pressed him. "I didn't want to harm her," he concluded, his voice barely audible. "Despite everything, I still loved her." "What happened that day?" Clara asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "On the cliff." "Tell me the truth, Victor." He took a deep breath as if preparing to lift an enormous weight. "We had argued in the car on the way to the cliff, our special place, where I had asked her to marry me years before. I wanted to talk, to understand why she had betrayed me, what I had done wrong. But she was different, determined. She told me she wanted to leave me, that she loved Francis." He paused, running a hand over his face. I was beside myself, not with anger but with pain. I said terrible things to her. When we reached the cliff, I got out of the car to calm down. She stayed in the car. I remember yelling at her to leave, to go back to him if that's what she wanted. Then I walked away along the path. "And then?" Clara whispered. "Then I heard the engine start. I turned and saw the car move. I thought she was leaving, abandoning me there. But instead it drove straight towards the edge of the cliff." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are you saying she committed suicide?" "I don't know," Victor replied, his eyes full of torment. "Truly, I don't know. It could have been an accident. Perhaps she lost control, or maybe she just wanted to scare me and things went wrong. Or perhaps," his voice cracked, "perhaps she chose to end everything that way." "But you didn't call for help? You didn't try to save her?" "Of course I did," Victor exclaimed. "I immediately called for help. I even climbed down the cliff trying to reach her. But it was impossible. The car had gone into the water, carried away by the currents." He stopped, breathing heavily. When they finally found the vehicle days later, she wasn't there. Her body was never recovered. Clara absorbed this information in silence. Victor's words seemed sincere, but something didn't quite add up. Why did you never tell this version to the police? In the diary, Blanche writes that she feared your anger, that she knew what you were capable of when you lost control. Victor looked at her with tired eyes. Because who would have believed me? A betrayed husband, a car plunging from a cliff, a wife who disappears. All the evidence pointed against me. And then there was my reputation. I was known for my temper, for my possessiveness. The authorities investigated, but without a body, without concrete evidence of a crime. The case was filed as an accident, or perhaps a suicide. No one wanted to dig too deep into the private life of one of the most powerful families in Wiltshire. He stood up again, heading towards an antique cabinet. He took out an inlaid wooden box and returned to the table. "Look," he said, opening the box. Inside was a necklace with a spiral pendant, identical to the seal on Blanche's letter. This was her favorite necklace, Victor explained. She always wore it. The day after the incident, I found it on my pillow. No one knows how it got there. The staff swears no one entered our room. Yet here it is. He picked up the necklace and held it out to Clara. "Take it." Hesitantly, Clara reached out. The moment her fingers touched the cold metal of the pendant, a strange sensation passed through her, like an electric shock, but not painful. Rather, it was like a wave of memories that were not hers. Images of a life she hadn't lived materialized in her mind. Young Victor, smiling at her on a terrace at sunset, a walk hand in hand along an avenue of cypress trees, the sound of a piano echoing through the manor, and then darker, scenes of arguments, of tense silences, of tears shed in solitude. With a gasp, Clara dropped the necklace on the table. What's happening to me?" she whispered, trembling. Victor looked at her with a strange mixture of fear and wonder. "You felt it, didn't you? You saw something." Clara nodded, unable to speak. It was as if a part of her, a buried, hidden part, had suddenly awakened at the contact with Blanche's object. "From the first moment I saw you," Victor said slowly, "I noticed something. An echo, a reflection. Not physically. You don't resemble Blanche at all. But there's something in the way you move, speak, even look at certain things in the manner, as if a part of her lives in you." "It's impossible," Clara murmured. "Is it?" Victor asked. "How do you explain the dreams you've had since your arrival? The moments of déjà vu? Your reaction when I touched your nape that first day? Exactly how Blanche reacted when I touched her that way." Clara felt breathless. It was true. Since her arrival at Maxwell Manor, she had experienced sensations she couldn't explain, knowledge she shouldn't have, reactions that seemed to come from somewhere deep and unknown in her psyche. "In the letter," she said slowly, "Blanche talks about a spiritual connection between us. It's about how a part of her would continue to live through me. Do you think it's possible?" "A month ago I would have said no," Victor replied. "But now I don't know what to believe anymore." He leaned across the table towards her. "There's a way to find out." "What way?" "There's a place in the manor I haven't told you about yet. A room in the East Wing, closed for years. It was Blanche's secret refuge, where she went when she wanted to be completely alone. Not even I entered there. If there's a place where her presence is still strong, it's that one." Clara felt a thrill of anticipation. "Take me there." Victor stood up, offering her his hand. "Are you sure? What you might discover could change everything." Clara looked at Victor's outstretched hand, aware that she was about to cross a threshold from which there would be no return. But it was too late to turn back now. Whatever the truth, about her connection to Blanche, about Victor's past, about her own destiny, she had to face it. "I'm sure," she said, taking his hand. As they left the dining room, Clara picked up the necklace with the spiral pendant and put it around her neck. The metal seemed to warm at the touch of her skin, as if recognizing a familiar body, as if finally she had come home. The east wing of the manor was as silent as an abandoned sanctuary. Clara and Victor's footsteps echoed on the marble floor as they traversed corridors that seemed not to have been walked for years. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, creating shadows that danced on the walls like restless ghosts. "It's at the end of this corridor," Victor said, his voice low as if he feared disturbing the sacred silence of the place. "The last door on the left." As they approached, Clara felt a change in the air, denser, charged with a subtle but palpable energy. Blanche's necklace seemed to pulse against her chest, like a second heart. Victor stopped before a dark wooden door, decorated with inlays forming spiral patterns, similar to the pendant Clara wore around her neck. "I've never entered here without her permission," he said, taking out a small golden key. "Not even after she was gone. It felt too great an invasion of her privacy." He inserted the key into the lock, which opened with a delicate click. The door moved on its own, as if pushed by an invisible hand, revealing the interior of the room. Clara held her breath. It was a circular space, probably located in one of the manor's towers. The walls were painted a deep blue, almost black, studded with tiny golden stars that glittered in the light of candles which, incredibly, were lit. In the center of the room was a small round table with a glass top that reflected the light. Shelves full of books covered the walls, interspersed with niches containing curious objects: crystals, seashells, small statues, framed photographs. A large arched window opened onto the night landscape, framing the full moon shining over vineyards and hills. "Who lit the candles?" Clara whispered, cautiously entering. Victor shook his head, visibly shaken. "I don't know. No one comes here. No one has the key but me." Clara slowly advanced into the room, drawn by a force she didn't fully understand. Every object seemed to call to her, to tell her a story. She brushed her fingers over a book open on a lectern, an ancient volume of poetry, open to a page marked with a peacock feather. The words seemed familiar, as if she had read them 1,000 times before. She turned and saw on a small table next to the window a small inlaid wooden casket. Without knowing why, she approached and opened it. Inside was a collection of small objects: a smooth sea stone, a dried flower, a red silk ribbon, a small silver key. Seemingly worthless objects, but emanating a particular energy, as if they had been charged with meaning by whoever collected them. "These are Blanche's treasures," Victor said behind her. "Objects she collected on her travels, in important moments of her life. She said they contained memories, emotions, parts of herself that she wanted to preserve." Clara nodded as if she already knew. In a way, she did. Her hand moved towards a small silver mirror on the table. She picked it up and looked at her reflection. For an instant, an impossible, surreal instant, she saw another face superimposed on hers, the face of a woman with green eyes and brown hair. The face of Blanche. She dropped the mirror with a muffled cry. "What did you see?" Victor asked, approaching. "Her," Clara whispered. "I saw her. It's as if she's here in this room. As if she never left." Victor looked at her intensely. Perhaps she never truly left. Clara turned to him, suddenly aware of the closeness of their bodies, of the electricity in the air between them. "What do you mean?" "Blanche believed in reincarnation," Victor explained. "She believed that souls could connect across time, that they could return to complete what was left unfinished. In the last months of her life, she often spoke of this. I thought it was just a phase, a passing interest. But now you think I am somehow her? That her soul lives in me?" Clara shook her head. "That's absurd, Victor. I am not Blanche. I am a different person with a different story." "I know," he replied with a sigh. "I'm not saying you are her. I'm saying that perhaps there's a connection, a bond that goes beyond rational understanding. Perhaps a part of her essence, of her soul, found refuge in you." Clara walked to the window, looking at the moon illuminating the Cotswold landscape. She felt a storm of conflicting emotions, confusion, fear, but also a strange peace, as if she was finally understanding something fundamental about herself. "The necklace," she said suddenly, touching the spiral pendant. "In the letter, Blanche mentions a symbol. She says it represents the eternal cycle, rebirth, continuation. Perhaps that's what she was trying to tell me." She turned to Victor, who was watching her with an expression of wonder mixed with apprehension. "There are things I know that I shouldn't know, sensations I feel that I shouldn't feel, as if I've lived a life that isn't mine. But at the same time, I am myself. I am Clara Reed." "And what if you could be both?" Victor suggested, slowly approaching. "Not Blanche reincarnated, but Clara with a piece of Blanche's soul, a memory, an echo resonating within you." Clara closed her eyes, letting this possibility wash over her. It was madness, and yet she felt there was a truth in those words, a truth that answered questions she had asked herself her whole life. Her feeling of being out of place, different, of having memories that weren't hers. "And what do you want from me, Victor?" she finally asked, opening her eyes to look directly at him. "Redemption. Forgiveness? A second chance with the ghost of your wife?" The question was direct, almost cruel, but necessary. Victor seemed struck, but he didn't recoil. "At first, perhaps," he admitted, "when I discovered your existence, when I began to plan. To bring you here, I wanted revenge. I wanted to punish Francis through you. But then I met you and I saw something. Something that awakened memories, feelings I thought were buried. And yes, for a moment I thought that perhaps in some impossible way Blanche had returned." He took a step forward, now mere inches from her. "But you are not Blanche. You are Clara. And what I feel for you now is not an echo of the past, but something new, something different. Something that frightens me as much as it attracts me." Clara felt her heart quicken. The sincerity in Victor's words was palpable, but there was still a crucial question she had to ask. "You told me what happened that day on the cliff, but you haven't answered the most important question. Did you push the car? Did you cause Blanche's disappearance?" Victor paled but held her gaze. "No," he replied firmly. "I didn't push the car. I didn't cause the accident. I swear it on my honor, on Blanche's memory, on everything I hold sacred. Whatever happened that day, I was not the one who caused it." Clara scrutinized him intently, looking for signs of lies, of manipulation. But all she saw was a man broken by pain, by remorse, and by a love he had never fully understood. "I believe you," she finally said, and to her surprise she realized it was true. She believed him, not because she had concrete proof of his innocence, but because she felt deep down that he was telling the truth. In that moment, something changed in the room. A sudden breeze made the candles flicker, creating dancing shadows on the walls. The necklace around Clara's neck seemed to warm, almost burning against her skin. And then, like a sigh of relief, the sensation subsided, leaving only a warm feeling of peace. "Did you feel that?" Victor whispered, looking around in wonder. Clara nodded. "Yes, it's as if something has finally been released. As if a knot has untangled." Victor looked at her with an expression of cautious hope. "Blanche?" "Perhaps," Clara replied. "Or perhaps it's just the truth finally emerging. The truth we both sought." She walked to the table in the center of the room and placed the necklace with the spiral pendant upon it. This belonged to Blanche, and it should remain here with her treasures. Victor nodded slowly, understanding. "And you? What will you do now?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities. Clara looked at the room around her, this sanctuary of memories, of connections, of intertwined souls. Then she looked at Victor, his grey eyes full of pain and hope. "I don't know yet," she replied honestly, "but I know that I can no longer pretend that nothing has happened, that I cannot ignore this connection, whatever it is. And I know that for the first time in my life, I feel I have a purpose, a destiny that belongs to me." She approached Victor, looking him in the eyes. "I am not Blanche, and I will never be her, but if a part of her soul lives in me, then perhaps I can help her find peace, and perhaps along the way I can find my own." Victor looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. "In me? Is there a place for me on this path?" Clara hesitated, aware of the weight of that question. There was an attraction between them, undeniable and powerful. But there was also a complicated past, shadows and secrets they still didn't fully understand. "I don't know," she finally replied, "but I believe the only way to find out is to walk this path together, not as ghosts of the past but as new people, choosing each other with open eyes." Victor nodded, a cautious smile illuminating his tired face. "Together, then." Clara turned to the window, watching the moon shine over the vineyards of Maxwell Manor. She felt a peace she had never known before, not the peace of silence and isolation that had protected her for so long, but a deeper peace, born of understanding and acceptance. Whatever the truth about her connection to Blanche, whatever destiny awaited her with Victor, she knew she would no longer be alone, that she had finally found a place to belong, a story to be a part of. And as she watched the night landscape, she seemed to see, perhaps only with the eyes of her soul, a feminine figure walking among the rows of vines. Her hair stirred by the breeze, her face turned towards the manor with a serene smile. For an instant, Clara felt a deep connection to that ethereal figure. Not fear, Not confusion, but recognition. Understanding. "Goodbye, Blanche," she whispered, even though she knew a part of her would always remain, intertwined with her soul like the threads of a complex and beautiful tapestry. She turned to Victor and, with a simple yet meaningful gesture, took his hand, their fingers intertwined, like a new beginning, like a promise. Outside, the moon continued its journey across the night sky, a silent witness to stories ending and others beginning. And Maxwell Manor, with its secrets and its shadows, finally seemed to breathe easier, as if an ancient weight had been lifted from its foundations. The future was uncertain, but for the first time Clara looked at it not with fear, but with curiosity and hope. Whatever had happened in the past, whatever mysterious connection bound her to Blanche, she was ready to accept it and to build from there, stone by stone, her own story. And as they left the secret room, the candles extinguished one by one, not with an abrupt gust but with a delicate flicker, like a whispered farewell from invisible lips. The door closed behind them, but this time it didn't seem like the end of something, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. Hand in hand, Clara and Victor walked down the East Wing corridor, no longer a place of ghosts and regrets, but a passage towards something new, imperfect, uncertain, but real. And for now that was enough. It was all they needed.